History often records empires as vast collective machineries, driven by parliaments, armies, and the shared economic ambitions of nations. But at the close of the 19th century, one of the greatest human catastrophes was conceived not by a nation, but by a single man. A man sitting in a quiet study in Brussels, looking at a map of a continent he would never visit. Leopold II was a man trapped in a country too small for his ambition. He became king of the Belgians in 1865, ruling a constitutional monarchy that was neutral, stable, and deeply unenthusiastic about colonial expansion. But Leopold was obsessed with colonies. He believed a monarchy without overseas possessions was a second-rate power. To get what he wanted, he had to become one of history's greatest confidence men. In September 1876, Leopold launched his grand strategy. He invited the world's leading explorers, geographers, and philanthropists to Brussels for a grand conference. His stated purpose was entirely noble: to open Central Africa to civilization, to introduce scientific exploration, and, most importantly, to eradicate the East African slave trade. To open to civilization the only part of our globe which it has not yet penetrated, to pierce the darkness which hangs over entire populations is, I venture to say, a crusade worthy of this century of progress. The brilliance of Leopold's rhetoric was that he used the language of anti-slavery and humanitarianism to disarm his critics. He created an organization called the Association Internationale Africaine, International African Association. It looked like an international charity, complete with a committee of high-minded philanthropists. In reality, it was a holding company with one sole shareholder, Leopold himself. They convinced Britain that Leopold's presence would keep the French out, and they promised all nations completely free trade within the basin, no tariffs, no customs duties. The United States was the first to recognize Leopold's claim, largely due to intense lobbying by Leopold's agents, who convinced American politicians that the Congo would be a model of free trade and a haven for liberated populations. Once the United States recognized it, the European powers followed suit like dominoes. When the Berlin Conference concluded, the État indépendant du Congo, the Congo Free State, was officially recognized. It was a territory of over 2 million square kilometers, roughly 80 times the size of Belgium. The world celebrated it as a triumph of humanitarian diplomacy, but the name was a cruel paradox. It was not a free state. It was the world's only private colony, owned entirely by one man, King Leopold II of Belgium. King Leopold's grand illusion was facing a brutal reality: bankruptcy. The administration of a territory 80 times the size of Belgium was staggeringly expensive. Steamships had to be disassembled, carried past the Congo River's cataracts by hand, and reassembled on the upper river. Roads had to be cut through dense jungle. Leopold had spent a significant portion of his personal fortune to secure the Congo, but the early returns were miserable. Ivory was valuable, but the transport costs were too high to yield a massive profit. He needed a way to extract wealth quickly, and he needed a force capable of enforcing his absolute will over millions of people. In 1888, Leopold established the Force Publique, state force. It was a mercenary army officered by white Europeans, Belgians, Italians, Swedes, and Danes, but manned by conscripted or enslaved African soldiers, often taken from distant regions, to ensure they had no tribal ties to the local populations they were ordered to control. To connect the vast interior of the upper Congo River to the Atlantic coast, Leopold's administration began construction on the Matadi-Leopoldville Railway in 1890. The project was an administrative priority, but a human catastrophe. Thousands of forced laborers were brought in to build the railway. The conditions were brutal. Disease, malnutrition, and exhaustion tore through the labor camps. It was said by contemporaries that every single wooden tie laid on that railroad track cost the life of an African worker. In 1888, a Scottish veterinarian named John Boyd Dunlop invented the pneumatic rubber tire. Almost overnight, the global demand for rubber skyrocketed. What had once been a minor commodity used for erasers and waterproof footwear became the lifeblood of the Industrial Revolution. Unlike South America, where rubber trees grew in accessible plantations, the Congo's rubber was found in Landolphia vines that climbed hundreds of feet into the forest canopy. Cultivating these vines on plantations would take years. The only way to capitalize on the boom immediately was to force the entire population of the Congo into the jungle to harvest wild rubber. To maximize profits, Leopold issued a series of secret decrees that effectively abolished the free trade he had promised at the Berlin Conference. He declared that all vacant lands, which included all forests, rivers, and communal hunting grounds, belonged exclusively to the state. With the stroke of a pen, the Congolese people were turned into trespassers on their own ancestral lands. They were forbidden from trading ivory or rubber with anyone except the state or the concession companies authorized by Leopold. The entire economy of the Congo Free State shifted from trade to pure state-sanctioned extraction. The state divided the territory into zones, leasing them to concession companies in which Leopold held massive shares. Each village was assigned a strict quota of rubber they had to deliver to the local state post every fortnight. Because wild rubber vines were rapidly depleted near the villages, men had to travel deeper into the jungle, spending days wading through swamps and climbing high into the trees to harvest the sap. As the quotas rose, the system turned to systematic terror to enforce compliance. Meet its rubber quota. The Force Publique was sent in to punish them. The soldiers were issued European ammunition, and their officers demanded justification for every bullet fired. To prove that they had not wasted ammunition or used it for hunting, the soldiers were required to bring back the right hand of every person they killed. The practice quickly became a horrific currency of its own. Soldiers who fell short of their quotas or wished to cover up unauthorized operations would sever the hands of living victims, including women and children, to present to their officers. The depopulation of the Congo during this period was staggering. It wasn't just execution, it was the total destruction of society. Fields went untended, leading to widespread famine. Communities fled into the deep jungle where they succumbed to tropical diseases like sleeping sickness. Demographers estimate that between 1880 and 1920, the population of the Congo fell by roughly half, a loss of millions of lives. For years, Leopold's propaganda machine successfully concealed the reality of the Congo from the world. But in 1890, an unexpected visitor arrived. George Washington Williams, an African-American veteran of the Civil War and an accomplished historian, traveled to the Congo believing he would find the humanitarian paradise Leopold had promised. "Your Majesty's government is cruel to its subjects. Your state has killed the Congolese people. It has stolen their lands, poisoned their commerce, and broken their hearts. From the mouth of the Congo River to its source, your government is a crime against humanity." Williams coined the phrase "crime against humanity" to describe what he witnessed. Though he died of tuberculosis on his return journey from Africa, his open letter sent shockwaves through Europe and the United States, fracturing the illusion of the Free State. Following Williams, other independent observers began to speak out. Among them was William Shepherd, one of the first African-American missionaries in the Congo. Fluent in local languages, Shepherd traveled deep into the interior and documented the destruction of villages that refused to harvest rubber. Shepherd wrote articles for missionary journals that described seeing storage houses filled with smoke-cured hands. His reports were vital because they came from an eyewitness who could talk directly to the survivors. Leopold's administration attempted to sue Shepherd for libel, but the international attention backfired, drawing more eyes to the Congo. The definitive blow to Leopold's regime came not from the jungle, but from a shipping port in Belgium. E.D. Morel, a young British clerk working for the Elder Dempster shipping line, noticed a troubling pattern in the company's ledgers. Morel looked at the ships arriving from the Congo, loaded to the brim with incredibly valuable rubber and ivory. Then he looked at the ships heading back to the Congo. They weren't carrying commercial goods or trade items. They were carrying nothing but soldiers, rifles, and ammunition. Morel realized that this wasn't trade. It was a massive slave labor operation run by the state. Morel resigned from his shipping job and dedicated his life to exposing the regime. He founded the Congo Reform Association, creating what historians consider the first modern international human rights campaign. In 1903, under pressure from public opinion, the British government ordered its consul in the Congo, Roger Casement, to investigate the allegations. Casement spent months traveling the upper river, renting a steamboat to visit remote villages unannounced. Casement's official report, published in 1904, confirmed every detail of Morel's campaign. He provided precise details, dates, and testimonies from victims of the rubber regime. Casement did something revolutionary. He teamed up with missionaries who had cameras. For the first time, the public didn't just read about atrocities, they saw them. Lantern slide shows of mutilated children were projected in town halls across Britain and America. The visual evidence was undeniable. By 1898, the international pressure had become unbearable for King Leopold II. The British and American governments demanded intervention. Reluctantly, the Belgian parliament agreed to annex the Congo, transforming it from the king's private property into a standard Belgian colony. But before the transfer was finalized in 1908, Leopold ensured his secrets would remain hidden. "I will give them my Congo, but they have no right to know what I did there." For several weeks in August 1908, the furnaces of the Congo Free State archives in Brussels burned day and night. Decades of administrative records, orders, tallies, and internal correspondence were turned to ash. Leopold deliberately attempted to erase the administrative memory of his actions. The legacy of Leopold's rule did not end with his death in 1909. The infrastructure built for extraction, the railways, the ports, the administrative centers, remained. The patterns of governance he established, prioritizing resource extraction over human welfare, continued to shape the Congo's relationship with the outside world for generations. When the Congo finally achieved independence in 1960, it inherited a nation designed for exploitation. The borders drawn at Berlin, the economy built on raw materials, and the culture of authoritarian rule all traced back to Leopold's original design. The violence never fully stopped. It merely changed forms. Today, the minerals that power our smartphones and electric cars come from the same region where rubber vines once grew. The demand for coltan and cobalt has created new cycles of extraction and suffering. The story of the Congo remains a warning about what happens when profit is placed above human dignity and when the world looks away.